And speaking of things with the legislative session, what has been signed end of the session? When you hear this, legislative session, as I have alluded to in the banter, will be over for the most part, and will be left with just the governor signing or vetoing bills, which usually gives us about 5 days until it's all wrapped up, unless there's a veto and then we have another vote and stuff. But with that said, it is always interesting to see what truly gets passed when all the smoke is settled, because during the session there's arguing, there's debating. So we made a list here of some of the biggest / interesting bills that the governor has signed into law as of Friday, March 29th, 2024. So we're going to go through them here and give you an overview with a mix of some discussion in here, which, diving into them here, what is our first one here, John?
House Bill 620 with regards to knives. So this adds to the existing law to provide that a political subdivision shall not enact certain rules, ordinances, or taxes regarding knives, to provide certain exceptions, and to provide that certain rules and ordinances from a political subdivision shall be null and void. This is one we talked about several shows ago, and I remember being in agreement with you on the majority, if not the entirety of this bill. I think it's a good idea. So I'm glad for one that this is going through.
Yeah, it basically, from what I remember from it, it is extending the Second Amendment or the different gun laws that we have in the states over to knives. This is also, if I remember in the text, like you said, it's extending to manufacturers to a certain level to give certain protections to them, which is also cool. Buck Knife Company up north, you're probably pretty happy. But then the second one we have here is Joint House Resolution 5 related to elections, amends existing laws to provide that individuals who are not citizens of the United States cannot vote in any election in the state of Idaho. So I'm going to put this out. First off, it's a resolution. So from what I'm remembering, it doesn't have any teeth, but it is kind of giving forward a statement that then can set precedent in the future for something else to be passed. That's saying that the Idaho Legislature is saying that, yes, if you're not a United States citizen, don't get to vote. So become a citizen if you want to vote, type of thing.
Well, I know some other states either are allowing or allow non-citizens to vote in local elections.
Right.
So It seems like we're
being consistent.
Right. Well, and if it's not in our state constitution, which I don't know off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever actually read the Idaho State Constitution. But if it's not in the Idaho State Constitution that only citizens can vote, then it probably should be.
Yeah, it might be, but I think overall a good thing to see. And then one that's also been a bit of a hot topic, House Bill 596, immunization, amends existing laws to allow students of majority age to submit a signed statement for exemption from immunization requirements. Here again, this one I have not dug into and read a ton, but I think here again, as we've talked about in the show before, Idaho has some of the highest rates of people bowing out of getting vaccines and immunizations in the state, or not in the state, in the nation. So something like this, I think, is a natural progression of you see where the populace is and those desires are, and then that's showing itself out in legislation here.
Yeah, this is another one that we talked about, and it makes sense to me to protect individuals against requirements for immunizations.
Right. Have some certain level of individual freedom in the decision of what you're injecting into your body.
Yep. It's kind of important.
Right. And then another one that's going to be a little bit of a snooze one, but something to be aware of. And for people out there, I know it's going to be an important thing. And I didn't know, I missed this. Number 4, House Bill 646, counties, amends existing laws to revise the boundaries of Benewah County, Bonner County, Clearwater County, Kootenai County, Lotta County, and Shoshone County. So this one, I'm not quite sure of all the implications, but it is something that has passed. So if you're in those counties, you might want to be involved in that process of what those counties will then end up looking like. Then number 5, we have House Bill 645, Schools District Board of Trustees, amends existing laws to revise provisions regarding school board recall elections, vaccines, and quorums. Probably a lot there to check into. So if you have kids in the public school system, that is something I would definitely look into because that got signed and passed. I don't think we actually had a segment where we talked about this. This is one of those that we missed, but something to be aware of there. Number 6, House Bill 630, related to counties, amends existing law to revise the boundaries of Cache County and Minidoka County. There again, if you live in those counties and are listening, you might want to look into that and be involved in that process. Something to be aware of there. Then a bill we have talked about, Senate Bill 1374, Concealed Weapons, amends existing laws to establish provisions regarding concealed weapons on certain properties owned by the state of Idaho. So that comes from our episode that we did about Scott Herndon and the different things with public land or public venues, how much authority they have in your concealed carry or right to carry arms on those areas if there's a private entity that is renting out a public area.
Yeah, that was a good one from what I can remember.
Yeah, just because the state rents out a piece of public property out to a private entity doesn't mean it doesn't lose certain inherent rights that since it's a public place that, you know, you get to carry your firearm because us in Idaho like our guns a lot.
Because it's important.
Which, there again, hot topic issues. The eighth one is House Bill 668, no public funds for gender transition. Pretty self-explanatory in that first statement. Adds to existing law to prohibit the use of public funds for gender transition procedures, which this one, I don't think we talked about on the show, but I am very excited that passed, and I think any conservative or Christian, that for that matter, in the state is very excited about this.
Yeah, this is one that I know, like you said, I know we didn't talk about, but I also know that this is a good thing. So I'm glad that this one ended up passing.
Yeah, similar to other discussions we've had about the gender thing, the taxpayers have a right to say where they want that funds to be able to go. And in a representative government, if the people don't want their money going to gender transitions, it shouldn't. And for lack of a better word, the will of the people has acted here. I'm surprised Little did not veto this because last year there was a bill related to minors having gender treatments or whatever. I think I want to say that was House Bill 71 or 72 or something number like that. And he was sitting there and saying he was not going to sign it. So I'm surprised he didn't try to stop this because this is just a progression of that bill from last year. Last year was just saying, hey, you can't do this for minors. Now it's a progression of saying, hey, doesn't matter what the age is. You just don't do that with public tax dollars.
Yep. I would be in agreement with that then, and that sounds good with me. But talking about minors, House Bill 465 also passed, and this is for crimes against children. And this amends and adds to existing law to provide for the crime of visual representations of the sexual abuse of children and to revise provisions regarding the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit. And this is another one I think we've talked about a couple times. And again, this seems great to me. I'm happy that we are updating laws to match the changing technological landscape. And so this is a good thing.
Right. The stated purpose for this one is that the legislature amends criminal child pornography and sexual exploitation of children law to include artificial intelligence generated sexual depictions of children, wherein the depictions appear to be that of a real child. And then it goes into penalties and stuff added. So yeah, this I think is great that we're not sitting here trying to expand the role of government. Some people might try to argue that. My 2 cents is you're just saying, hey, we take eternal principles and we apply them to ever-changing situations. And one of those is that we have these AI systems that are super cool and advanced that can generate these images. And I think it'll be great in so many other ways. But one of those drawbacks is because we're sinners and we're fallen human beings, we're going to abuse that stuff we make. And so updating this legislation in such a way that it is accounting for those new developments and the uses that as sinners we will do with it, I think is a really, really good proactive step.
Yeah, I agree. AI technology is one of those things that is advancing and expanding super fast. And like most other things, people are going to find ways to work around the law. But just because people work around the law doesn't mean there shouldn't be a law around what is right and wrong. Well, so
if we believe in objective truth, then we know what's on the ledger of the law. It doesn't matter if it is on the ledger or not. We believe it's objective, right and wrong, and we should update our laws in such a way that we can prosecute based on that objective truth. And speaking, I guess, of laws and ways that we run things, number 10, we have Senate Bill 1235, Library Board elections, amends existing law to change library board elections from once every 6 years to once every 4 years. And I'm kind of indifferent. I get the idea behind it. It's trying to increase the turnover rate because there's been more concern about the libraries and what's going on with that. And trying to trying to decrease those term limit times so you have quicker elections that people can still remember the things that happen, because sometimes in politics people can have a short memory span, I think is a really, really good thing to have happen. So then kind of also speaking of things related to education, we have number 11, House Bill 66, abortion amends existing law to prohibit abortion providers from furnishing materials or instructions related to sex education curricula. So this one we didn't talk about, but obviously with Idaho having, I think, one of the best abortion laws in the nation, I think this is just a natural progression of it moving forward to be like, no, you're not going to get into a whole bunch of weird stuff.
I'm glad that this is a law that we're putting on the books again. So
right. And then similarly, a thing that I know a lot of people have been happy to hear about, and a lot of people didn't even know was the thing that we got repealed. We have number 12, House Bill 617, Syringe and Needle Exchange, repeals existing law to remove the Syringe and Needle Exchange Act, which I know that's been something that's been spearheaded by the Idaho Family Policy Center. So if you like that being repealed, might want to give them a thumbs up on top of the senator that's been working with them on that. I think this is a really great thing to do. We don't need to be spending money on giving people clean needles to inject drugs. We really should not be removing the consequences, but we should be giving them avenues to get over their addiction.
Yeah, so the next one that got passed was the Senate Joint Motion 103 with regards to water. So this was that states finding on the legislature and opposes the removal or breaching of the dams on the Columbia Snake River system and its tributaries, which I remember talking about this also, and I agree that breaching dams is probably not in our best interest unless we can prove really good reasons for it.
This, I know, in a certain way, comes because of some stuff that Mike Simpson is doing. As John has said, we've talked about in the show before, I personally believe if you are a person who believes in clean energy and wanting to do what's great for the environment, which is all that this is guised under, right? Keeping the dams is the most environmentally friendly thing you can do, because they've been built, I don't know, I want to say like 40, probably more than 40 years now since they're building. That means all the, carbon emissions, if you want to talk about that went into their construction, all the time, all the labor, everything. We've already gotten that back in spades because they're not emitting any carbon emissions. They're just harnessing the power of water moving through them. Secondly, if you want to say that they have a big environmental effect on things, the environment is, after 50 years of a dam being there, the environment is actually now adapted where it relies on that dam. There's probably a ton of different wildlife that have adapted their patterns and their migration because it's a large body of water. Water has effect on things. So I would argue taking them out would have even a larger environmental impact. And if we're talking about the financial part of it, that we'll remove them and we'll add an equal amount of solar or wind. How much carbon emissions does it take to put all those in, rather than just using the existing dams we have and upgrading them as need be to get more and more efficiency out of them, because it's been really crazy what we can do there. But that, me off my soapbox, I'm glad this was passed. I know it's not any bill to stop it in its tracks, nor are they going to be able to do that. But I think this is some really, really encouraging stuff, especially for us in Idaho, that me growing up here, I didn't realize until I traveled outside the state, are very blessed to have cheap and very dependable power compared to the rest of the nation.
Yeah, we legitimately do have cheap, dependable, reliable power, and that is a very, very good thing.
Which, on that with energy, then we have Senate Concurrent Resolution 11-3 related to energy, state findings of the legislature, and declares support for the development of clean and safe nuclear energy, which on that, if you're not going to go hydro, I say you go nuclear.
I think you're right. I think that's the only other one that makes sense.
Yeah, that as much as there's the scare of nuclear, but I feel like in 2024, we should be able to find a way to do nuclear.
Right. There are things to be concerned about it, but as technology has improved, nuclear has become much less dangerous than it used to be.
Plus, it's not a super new thing.
Right. Well, and speaking about technological and advancement, we have Senate Bill 1274. This is with regards to higher education. This adds to existing law to prohibit institutions of higher education from requiring diversity statements as a condition of employment or admission. And I saw even in my newsfeed earlier think it was either this week or last. I don't remember which one. I saw this one go through. I read some articles, and this is, I think, a great thing. We're joining with several other states that have done this. This is good. I know in Texas specifically, getting rid of these statements has changed the way that Texas universities are spending money and are staffing people. And if this changes similar things here, that can only be a good thing.
Right, which I don't know if it might have been specifically on this bill, but we did have a segment talking about that, of how we have these universities, and in Idaho, we're giving them funding. We want education, but we shouldn't be investing that in institutions that then on the flip side are like, yeah, you all have traditional values and you're investing in us, but we're going to turn around and completely indoctrinate, for lack of a better word, in immoral practices and encourage those. No, as the taxpayers, we have a right to say, no, you can't. And also, I would argue it is a form of discrimination if you're basing it all upon diversity and other things rather than merits. I mean, we can get into a discussion of how much we as a society should do things based on merit. But if there's any place that should be all about merit, I feel like it should be education.
It very much should be.
Which, moving on to our next one, number 16, House Bill 532, identification cards, amends existing law to remove a requirement that an individual must not have possessed a driver's license for the last 6 months to be eligible to receive a certificate education card. This one I'm not very sure on. This is something we might do a deeper dive on. If it's something that you all care about, then please message us about it. The basic gist that I got from this is if a person has had a driver's license in some state or Idaho recently, they can get a certificate of identification card. So it's kind of a catch-all for those rare ones. But you do have to have some previous form of identification to try to get this. So it's not like saying that you can get a card that's valid for voting when you aren't a citizen or something. So That's the understanding I have. So not something to be super, super uppity about. And then our last one, number 18, House Bill 406, Uniform Controlled Substances, adds to existing law to provide for the crimes of trafficking in fentanyl and drug-induced homicide, which this happened earlier in the session, but basically going through and saying, hey, we're putting fentanyl on with illicit substances on that roster, that definition, right? And if someone dies from that drug, the person who gave them that trafficked that substance can be prosecuted for drug-induced homicide, so you could be liable for that person's death, which is trying to just give it some more teeth to be like, don't do drugs in Idaho, because if something goes south, even if you think it's a good thing, which I don't agree with you with, but even if you do and you're deciding you're going to skirt the law, we're going to make it even more razor sharp that when you do get caught, it's going to sting a lot. So maybe just don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And this is one that I definitely agree with. This is a good thing for our state.
Oh, yes. On the whole, going through all these, and it wasn't like I was trying to find all the positive ones. I was just going through and being like, okay, cool, that's something people care about. And there's probably other ones I don't know. We'll have links in the description of the show notes where you can go and see the full list of all the bills that have been signed or not signed, and check on ones that, as of the recording of this, there might be other ones the governor has signed or vetoed. But we really wanted to give you guys an overview of like, hey, once the game's over, what's the final stats? Well, this is it. This is what we got. This is what's passed. Happy or sad. This is what's kind of moved through it with the legislature.